Well, thank you very much. And Madam President, I just want to thank Senator Portman for the incredible job he's been doing as a champion of efforts to create more private sector jobs in this country, to make it easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs, for the private sector to create the jobs that we need. And Senator Portman has shown significant leadership in his campaign for the Senate last year in Ohio, developing the Portman Jobs Plan. And he went to factories and small businesses because he knows, all across the state of Ohio, because he knows that small businesses are the engines that drive the economy. 70% of the jobs created in this country are created by our small businesses, one at a time. And when there are government rules and regulation and red tape and increased expenses, it makes it much, much harder, because it doesn't provide the certainty that the small businesses of this country need in order to create those new jobs. They may not be willing to take the additional risk and the additional expense because of the unknown concerns. And I think that is one of the things that's highlighted in this wonderful plan that Senator Portman has put together along with the members of the Republican Party. A big part of this has to do with the rules and regulations that come out of Washington, D.C. Rules and regulations that may not even be connected to laws that were passed in this body, but rules and regulations put forward by this administration, by people who have a different view of how America works. So I was encouraged over 100 days ago when the president said he had an executive order that would try to eliminate some of the red tape. Well, here we are, 100 days later, and it's just another broken promise from this administration. The red tape continues to hold American small businesses hostage. We're trying to cut through that red tape. And you know, the American people realize it. The administration may not realize it, but the American people realize it. When the American people were questioned just this last month, are there too few regulations or too many regulations and the impact on business? A majority said there are too many regulations on our businesses. And how much money does Washington spend on regulations? Well, I'll tell you, Madam President, government spent a record of $55 billion developing and enforcing rules last year. $55 billion developing and enforcing rules last year. Now, that's just the spending of government. What is the impact on our businesses around the country? Well, for every $1 that government spends to put forth and enforce these rules, it costs businesses of this country $30. So over $1.5 trillion expended by businesses across the country, a drag on our economy, making it harder for them, not easier, but harder and more expensive for the private sector to create jobs. So $30 of business expense for every $1 spent in rules and regulations out of Washington. And Madam President, people are worried because it's going to get worse. There are still 224 rules in the pipeline that have been labeled as economically significant. What's an economic significant rule? Well, it's a rule that has an impact on the economy of over $100 million. 224 of them coming down the line. Is it a surprise that the unemployment rate continues so high? And it's because of the rules and regulations of this administration. Now, what do the American people believe about this? Well, over 70% of the American people believe several different things about the effect of the rules, and I'll tell you what they are. This is polling just last month. They will tell you that additional environmental regulation increases the price of energy for things like gasoline and electricity. The rules coming out of Washington, 70% of Americans believe increases the cost of things like gasoline and electricity, the energy issues. How much is the pain at the pump costing the American family this year? Well, about $800 per family this year, higher gasoline rates than last year. Well, if you're a family, that has an impact on your quality of life. It has an impact if you're trying to deal with bills and kids and a mortgage. But there are a lot of regulations out there. So the American people see this. Also, over 70% of the American people know in their hearts and believe that small businesses, the job creators of this country, small businesses are impacted much more than the large businesses of the country. But it's the small businesses that we want to help. The other thing that more than 70% of the American people believe, is in a poll by the Terrence Group, If regulations make it too expensive to keep jobs in America, businesses will continue to move overseas. Businesses will continue to move overseas. There is so much uncertainty with the rules and regulations coming out of this town that it is paralyzing the rest of our country. And that's just on the rules and regulations aspect that people can see. There are so many rules and regulations that are still coming. One came out, I was at a hospital in Cody, Wyoming, talking about health care, because I've practiced medicine for 25 years, taking care of families all across the Cowboy State. Visiting at a hospital in Cody, Wyoming, and they're saying, you know, we're trying to figure out this one aspect of the health care law called accountable care organizations. It's 6 pages of the law, you know, that 2,700-page law that was crammed through in the middle of the night. Americans were saying, no, we don't want this. Well, the people that do the regulations, they took 6 pages of the law, and they came up with over 400 pages of regulations. They just came out about a month ago. And the hospital administrator said, you know, we're having to take money away from patient care, from helping with nurses and therapists, to pay for consultants to try to explain these rules and regulations to us so we can abide by them. Those are the kind of regulations and rules on steroids that I continue to hear about as I traveled in the last week or so at home, visiting with people, visiting in the communities, listening to what people have to say. And the concern and the uncertainty because of what's coming out of Washington is a drag on our economy. It is preventing us from making it easier and cheaper for the private sector to create more jobs. People all across the country are concerned, Madam President, and that's why I'm so happy to be here with Senator Portman today and his efforts, his leadership on a jobs plan that is one that focuses fundamentally on the things that will get government off the back of the American people and let the American people get back to work. And so with that, Senator Portman, I want to thank you for your leadership at a time when we see a government that is borrowing too much, spending too much, and growing bigger every day. And I'm very appreciative of your efforts to get things back into control and get the decisions making out of Washington and back to the hometowns and states across the country.
Well, thank you, Dr. Barrasso.